Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can save a life. Sometimes it can change everything. Jace Monroe was just trying to help a scared little boy in a school parking lot. 8-year-old Marcus stood frozen by a Tesla, rocking back and forth, lost in his own world of fear. Most people would have walked away, but Jace saw his own son in those frightened eyes. He pulled 3 oranges from his lunch bag and started juggling. Simple, gentle, real. The boy stopped rocking, his eyes lifted. For the first time in months, Marcus smiled. Behind them, a woman in an expensive coat watched in amazement. Ariel Voss had spent millions trying to reach her son. Teams of doctors, specialists, therapists, nothing worked. Now a stranger with kind eyes and worn hands had done the impossible. She didn't know this man was about to lose his apartment. She didn't know he was choosing between gas money and groceries. All she knew was that he had given her son something priceless. But what happens when she discovers the man who saved her child is drowning himself? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The worn driver's jacket hanging on the back of Jace Monroe's kitchen chair told a story of survival. Faded navy blue with a small tear near the left elbow, it had seen him through 3 years of 12-hour days behind the wheel of his Honda Civic. The jacket wasn't much to look at, but it was honest work, and honest work was all Jace had ever known how to do. At 5:30 in the morning, the apartment was still dark when Jace moved quietly through his routine. Coffee first, the cheap kind that came in a large canthon, a quick check on Emma. His 8-year-old daughter slept curled around her stuffed elephant, the one her mother had given her before the cancer took everything good from their world. Sarah's photograph watched from the nightstand, her smile frozen in better times when medical bills weren't stacked on the kitchen counter like accusations. Jace pulled the jacket over his shoulders and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle there too. Today would be like yesterday and the day before. Drive until his back ached, smile at strangers, pretend the growing pile of unpaid bills wasn't slowly drowning them both. But Emma would have breakfast when she woke up, and clean clothes for school, and a father who read her stories before bed. That had to be enough, because it was all he had left to give. The morning rush brought its usual parade of passengers, a businessman checking emails, his expensive suit, a reminder of the life Jace had once imagined for himself before dreams got buried under hospital debt. A college student heading to her job at a coffee shop, counting crumpled dollars like they were precious gems. An elderly woman going to visit her husband in a nursing home, clutching a photo with shaking hands. Jace knew their stories because he listened. In a world of screens and distractions, he offered something rare, genuine attention. The businessman started talking about his divorce. The student mentioned her scholarship application. The elderly woman shared memories of 60 years of marriage. They tipped him well, not just for the ride, but for the kindness. By 11 o'clock, Jace was parked outside Lincoln Elementary, waiting for his regular pickup. Mrs. Chen needed rides to her cleaning job 3 times a week. She was 72 and spoke broken English, but her smile was fluent in gratitude. When she climbed into his back seat, she always brought him something, a piece of candy, a folded paper crane, once a small orange from her lunch. "How is your Emma?" she asked, settling into the seat with careful movements. "Growing too fast," Jace replied, adjusting the rearview mirror to see her weathered face. "Starting to ask questions I don't know how to answer." Mrs. Chen nodded with the wisdom of someone who had raised 5 children on a seamstress's salary. "Children ask with their hearts, not their heads. You answer the same way." It was while he waited for Mrs. Chen to finish her shift that Jace first saw the boy. Marcus stood by the Tesla like a statue, his small body rigid with whatever storm was raging inside his mind. Other children flowed around him like water around a stone, heading to cars and buses with the easy chaos of childhood. But Marcus remained frozen, rocking slightly, lost in a place adults couldn't reach. Jace had seen that look before. Emma had worn it in the weeks after Sarah died, when the world became too much and the only safe place was somewhere deep inside herself. He recognized the signs, the clenched fists, the rapid breathing, the way the boy's eyes darted without really seeing. Most people walked past. A few glanced over with mild concern before continuing their day. But Jace saw his own daughter in that frightened child, and he couldn't drive away. He reached into his lunch bag and pulled out 3 Orange's afternoon snack, the only fruit he could afford that would keep without refrigeration. The first orange went up in a gentle arc, caught easily in his weathered palm. Then the second, then the third, until he had a simple rhythm going. Nothing fancy, just the quiet magic of objects defying gravity for a moment. The boy's rocking slowed, his eyes focused on the orange dance happening just for him. Jace kept his movements gentle, hypnotic almost, the way Sarah used to rock Emma to sleep during those first sleepless months. The oranges caught the afternoon sunlight, 3 small suns spinning in careful circles. And then it happened. Marcus smiled. Not much, just a small upward curve at the corners of his mouth, but it transformed his entire face. The tension melted from his shoulders, his breathing slowed. For that moment, he was just a little boy watching something wonderful. Jace caught all 3 oranges in his hands and knelt down to Marcus's level. "Pretty cool, right?" he said softly. "My daughter taught me how to do that. She said juggling is just playing catch with yourself." Marcus didn't speak, but he nodded. His eyes were bright now, curious instead of frightened. "Maybe next time I see you, I'll show you how to start with just 1 orange, Jace offered. "You think you'd like that?" Another nod, stronger this time. Behind them, neither Jace nor Marcus noticed the woman in the expensive coat who had stopped breathing. Arielle Voss stood 20 feet away, her phone forgotten in her manicured hands, watching a miracle unfold in a school parking lot. For 3 years, she had watched her son disappear into himself. 3 years of specialists and therapists and experimental treatments that cost more than most people made in a decade. She had flown Marcus to clinics in Switzerland, hired the best child psychologists in the country, even tried alternative therapies that her rational mind rejected, but her desperate heart embraced. Nothing had worked. Marcus spoke less each month, withdrew further into whatever private world offered him shelter from anxieties she couldn't understand or fix. The doctors had words for its selective mutism, anxiety disorder, sensory processing issues, but words didn't give her back, her little boy. Now a stranger in a worn jacket had accomplished in 5 minutes what teams of experts couldn't achieve in years. Marcus was present, engaged, smiling, actually smiling. Arielle studied this unlikely miracle worker. Mid-30s, she guessed, with kind eyes and hands that had seen real work. His jacket was faded and his jeans had been mended at the knee, but he moved with the confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was. When he spoke to Marcus, his voice held the patient warmth she remembered from her own father, back when love was measured in time spent rather than money made. She watched Jace stand and gently place 1 orange in Marcus's palm. Her son closed his fingers around it like he was holding something precious, which maybe he was. The man said something that made Marcus giggle, actually gigland. Arielle felt tears threatening her carefully applied makeup. Who was this person? And how had he reached her unreachable child? The question followed her as she collected Marcus, noting how he kept looking back toward the parking spot where the kind stranger had been. It haunted her through dinner as Marcus actually engaged in conversation, asking about oranges and whether they could learn to juggle. It kept her awake that night as she realized she had just witnessed something she'd stopped believing possible, her son connecting with another human being. The next morning, Arielle made a decision that would have surprised her 6 months ago. Instead of going straight to her office, she drove to Lincoln Elementary 20 minutes early and waited. She told herself it was just curiosity, just a mother's need to understand what had helped her child. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She was looking for hope. And hope, she was beginning to understand, sometimes came disguised as a man in a worn driver's jacket who carried oranges in his lunch bag and knew how to see children for exactly who they were. The morning sun caught the windshield of an aging Honda Civic as it pulled into the parking lot, and Ariel Vos, Billionaire, CEO, woman who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deal, held her breath like a schoolgirl, waiting for her first crush to notice her. Because sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. Sometimes they're the ones we need most, even when we don't know we're looking for them. Marcus's silence journal lay open on Ariel's mahogany desk, its pages mostly blank, except for dates and brief, heartbreaking entries. October 3 had no words today. October 15th pointed at juicebox. November twand hummed while drawing. Each sparse notation represented a mother's desperate hope that her son might emerge from the protective shell he'd built around himself. But today's entry was different. December honest smiled at the orange man. Talk to me about juggling for 10 minutes. Ariel had written it 3 times, unable to believe the words even as they flowed from her pen. The private investigator she'd hired worked with the efficiency that came from a $5,000 retainer. Within 48 hours, she had a file on Jace Monroe that read like a testament to quiet perseverance. 34 years old. Widowed 3 years ago when his wife Sarah lost her battle with ovarian cancer. Father to Emma Monroe, age 8. High school graduate who'd planned to attend community college before life intervened. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants. Just a man trying to keep his head above water in an ocean of medical debt and single parenthood. The financial picture was stark. Medical bills from Sarah's treatment, $347, 0. Insurance coverage, $89, 0. Remaining debt, $258, 0. Spread across 7 different collection agencies. Current monthly income from rideshare driving, approximately $2,800. Monthly expenses, $3,100. The mathematics of his situation were brutally simple. He was drowning by degrees, one unpaid bill at a time. Ariel closed the file and stared out her office window at the Seattle skyline. 42 floors below, people moved through their lives unaware that she was watching, making decisions that could change everything. She had built her technology empire on the belief that every problem had a solution, every need could be met with the right application of resources and intelligence. But Marcus's silence had humbled her, teaching her that some puzzles couldn't be solved with money or algorithms. Until now, until a man who juggled oranges had proven her wrong. The photographs from the investigator showed Jace's daily routine. Dropping Emma at school, his face bright with the forced cheerfulness of a parent trying to shield his child from adult worries. Waiting in his car between rides, counting bills and checking his phone with the anxious expression of someone always calculating how to make ends meet. Reading bedtime stories to Emma in their small apartment, the love between them evident even through a telephoto lens. But it was the final photograph that made Ariel's decision for her. Jace stood in a pharmacy, holding a prescription bottle and speaking quietly to the pharmacist. The investigator's notes explained, subject's daughter has recurring ear infections. Prescription antibiotics cost $180. Subject left without medication, asking pharmacist to hold it until Friday. Ariel reached for her phone, then stopped. Direct contact would complicate everything, raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. But there were other ways to help, anonymous channels that could provide assistance without explanation. The eviction notice arrived on Jace's door the same day Emma's fever spiked to 102 degrees. He stood in his small kitchen, holding both pieces of paper like competing prophecies of disaster. 30 days to pay 3 months of back rent or find somewhere else to live. And Emma curled on the couch, burning with infection, while the medicine she needed waited at a pharmacy he couldn't afford to visit. "Daddy, my ear hurts," Emma whispered, her voice small and fragile. Jace knelt beside the couch and pressed his hand to her forehead, feeling the heat that meant her body was fighting something he couldn't fix with stories or hugs. I know, sweetheart. Daddy's going to take care of it. But how? The math was impossible. Even if he worked 24 hours a day for the next week, he couldn't earn enough to cover the rent, the antibiotics, and food. Something had to give, and it couldn't be Emma's health. He was reaching for his phone to call the pharmacy when it rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but desperation made him answer anyway. Mr. Monroe, this is Jennifer Walsh from Pacific Medical Billing Services. I'm calling about your outstanding balance. Jace's heart sank. Another collection call, another demand for money he didn't have. Listen, I know I'm behind, but actually, sir, I'm calling with good news. An anonymous benefactor has paid your entire balance. All 47, zero of it. The words didn't make sense. Jace sat down heavily in his kitchen chair, the eviction notice crumpling in his free hand. I'm sorry, what? Your medical debt has been paid in full by an anonymous donor. You'll receive confirmation in writing within 5 business days. But who? I'm sorry, sir. The donor requested complete anonymity. I can only tell you that the payment was made this morning, and your account is now at zero balance. After the call ended, Jace stared at his phone like it might offer explanations. Anonymous benefactor, he didn't know any wealthy people. His passenger tips were generous sometimes, but not $47,000 generous. Sarah's family had barely scraped together money for her funeral. His own parents lived on Social Security and couldn't help even if they wanted to. The second call came 20 minutes later, while Emma dozed fitfully on the couch. Mr. Monroe, this is David Kim from Cascade Property Management. I'm calling about your rent situation. Here it comes, Jace thought, the final push over the edge. Mr. Kim, I got the notice. I'm working on the money, but I need a little more time. Sir, your account has been brought current. Someone paid your back rent this morning, plus 3 months in advance. Jace's legs gave out. He slumped against the kitchen counter, his mind reeling. That's impossible. I have the payment confirmation right here. Cashier's check for $7,200. The payer requested anonymity, but the money is real. You're all caught up. I don't understand. Neither do I, sir. But you're one lucky man. Someone obviously cares about you and your daughter. The third miracle came an hour later, when Jace's phone buzzed with a text from his bank. Deposit alert. 1,500 has been added to your checking account. Source: anonymous wire transfer. Emma stirred on the couch, her fever-bright eyes finding his face. Daddy, can we get my medicine now? Jace looked at his phone, then at his daughter, then at the eviction notice that was no longer a death sentence. Somewhere in the city, someone he'd never met had decided his family was worth saving. Someone had looked at their desperate situation and chosen to help, asking nothing in return except anonymity. The questions could wait. Right now, his daughter needed medicine, and for the first time in months, he could provide it without choosing between her health and their home. As he helped Emma into her jacket, Jace found himself thinking about the boy in the parking lot, the one who'd smiled when the oranges danced in the air. He thought about kindness given freely, without expectation of reward. Maybe this was how it worked, an act of compassion rippling outward until it found its way back to where it was needed most. He didn't know he was right. He didn't know that 42 floors above the city, a woman in an expensive office was watching her son draw pictures of oranges and smiling for the first time in years. He didn't know that his simple gesture had saved more than just a frightened child in a parking lot. But he was beginning to understand that miracles weren't always grand gestures. Sometimes they were as simple as 3 oranges spinning in the afternoon light, or an anonymous gift that meant the difference between survival and surrender. The medicine cost $180. For the first time in 3 years, Jace paid it without counting the bills twice, or calculating what it would cost him tomorrow. Emma held his hand as they walked to the car, her fever already breaking under the promise of healing. "Daddy," she said, "do you think angels are real?" Jace looked up at the December sky, grey with winter clouds, and thought about impossible kindness from impossible sources. "I'm starting to think they might be, sweetheart." I'm starting to think they might be. The anonymous cashier's check sat on Jace's kitchen table like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Made out for exactly 1,847, the precise amount needed to cover Emma's upcoming dental work. No note, no explanation, just careful penmanship and a bank stamp from First National downtown. The third mysterious payment in 2 weeks, each one arriving exactly when desperation reached its peak. Jace turned the check over in his hands, searching for clues that weren't there. The paper was expensive, cream-colored with subtle watermarks. Whoever was doing this had resources, attention to detail, and somehow knew more about his financial situation than he was comfortable with. But Emma's smile was worth any amount of uncomfortable questions, and her loose tooth had become infected, requiring extraction and antibiotics. "Daddy, look!" Emma's voice carried from the living room, bright with excitement he hadn't heard in months. She bounded into the kitchen wearing her school backpack, practically vibrating with energy. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm reading at 4th grade level now." The reading improvement had started 3 weeks ago, coinciding with Emma's improved health and his reduced stress. When a parent stopped worrying about keeping the lights on, apparently their 8-year-old stopped worrying too. Children, Jace was learning, were emotional sponges who absorbed every anxiety their parents tried to hide. "That's my smart girl," he said, pulling her into a hug that smelled like strawberry shampoo and the vanilla wafers they could finally afford to pack in her lunch. "Your mum would be so proud." Emma's expression grew thoughtful. "Do you think she knows about me getting better at reading?" The question hit Jace in the chest, the way it always did when Emma asked about Sarah. 3 years, and grief still caught him off guard, sneaking up during ordinary moments, like a tiger hiding in tall grass. "I think she knows everything important about you, sweetheart, and I think she's cheering you on every day." After dropping Emma at school, Jace found himself driving past Lincoln Elementary again. It had become an unconscious habit, this slight detour that added 10 minutes to his route, but somehow felt necessary. He told himself he was just checking on the boy Marcus, making sure he was okay. But truthfully, he was hoping for another chance to help, another moment when simple kindness might matter. He was rewarded with a sight that made him pull over. Marcus stood by the same Tesla, but today he wasn't frozen. Today he was moving his hands in small, careful circles, practicing the motion of juggling with invisible objects. When he saw Jace's car, his face lit up with recognition. Jace rolled down his window and called out, "Hey there, practicing your juggling?" Marcus nodded enthusiastically and jogged over to the car. For a moment, Jace was struck by the transformation. 3 weeks ago, this child had been lost in his own world of anxiety. Now he was running toward interaction, seeking connection instead of fleeing from it. "I've been practicing with tennis balls," Marcus said, his words coming in a rush. "But I can only keep one going so far. Will you show me with 2? The request was so normal, so wonderfully ordinary, that Jace felt his throat tighten. "Of course, buddy, but I don't have any oranges today." Marcus's face fell for just a moment, then brightened. "I have some." He ran to the Tesla and returned with a small mesh bag containing 4 perfect oranges. "My mum packed extra today. She said I might see you." His mum. Jace glanced toward the school pickup area and spotted her immediately, the elegant woman in the expensive coat who'd been appearing more frequently around the school. She stood by the Tesla, watching their interaction with an intensity that seemed out of proportion for a casual observer. When their eyes met across the parking lot, she offered a small wave and a smile that seemed both grateful and nervous. Jace spent the next 20 minutes teaching Marcus the basics of 2-object juggling. Start with 1, get the rhythm, add the second when it feels natural. The boy was a quick learner, eager and focused in the way children became when adults gave them undivided attention. By the time they were done, Marcus could manage 3 throws and 2 catches in succession. "You're a natural," Jace said, meaning it. "Keep practicing, and next week we'll try for 3 in a row." "Really? You'll be here next week?" The hope in Marcus's voice made something twist in Jace's chest. "If you want me to be." "I do. I really, really do." As Jace drove away, he caught sight of the elegant woman kneeling beside Marcus, listening intently as the boy demonstrated his new skills with animated gestures. There was something familiar about her posture, the way she focused completely on her son's words. It reminded him of how he listened to Emma with the fierce attention of a parent who understood that childhood was fleeting and every moment mattered. That evening, as Emma practiced her reading at the kitchen table, Jace found himself thinking about the mysterious benefactor again. The timing of the help was too perfect to be coincidental. Someone was watching, someone who cared enough to intervene at exactly the right moments. But who and why? "Daddy," Emma said, looking up from her book, "do you remember when Mama used to say that God sends people to help us when we need it most?" Jace's breath caught. Sarah had said that, usually when they were struggling to pay bills even before her diagnosis. She'd talk about unexpected checks arriving just in time, or strangers offering help when they needed it most. I remember. Maybe that's what's happening now. Maybe God sent someone to help us, and we just don't know who it is yet. Out of the mouths of babes, Jace reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Emma's ear. "You might be right, sweetheart. You might be exactly right." Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Jace sat at his computer and did something he'd never done before. He tried to research his mysterious benefactor. The payments had come from different sources. The medical debt through a legal firm that specialized in anonymous charitable giving. The rent through a property management company that refused to reveal their client's identity. The smaller checks through various banks with privacy policies that might as well have been vault doors. Whoever was helping him had resources, connections, and a commitment to anonymity that bordered on obsessive. But they also had detailed knowledge of his financial situation, his daughter's medical needs, and his daily routines. The combination was both comforting and unsettling. As he prepared for bed, Jace found the cashier's check on his dresser and studied it one more time. The handwriting was feminine, precise, educated. The paper stock was expensive. The amount was exact to the penny for Emma's dental needs. Someone cared. Someone was watching out for them with a tenderness that felt almost parental. For now, that would have to be enough. Tomorrow he would take Emma to the dentist without worrying about the cost. Tomorrow he would teach Marcus to juggle 3 oranges. Tomorrow he would continue living in a world where anonymous angels made the impossible possible. The check went into his wallet next to Emma's school photo, a talisman of mysterious grace that was slowly teaching him to believe in miracles again. Emma's drawing covered most of the kitchen table, a riot of crayons depicting what she called the perfect family. 3 figures stood hand in front of a house with smoke curling from the chimney. A tall man with dark hair, a little girl with pigtails, and between them, a woman with long brown hair and a kind smile. At the bottom, in Emma's careful second-grade handwriting, she'd written, "My family," with a heart drawn around the words. Jace stood in the doorway, coffee mug forgotten in his hands, studying the picture that revealed more than his 8-year-old daughter realized. For 3 years, their family had been a unit of 2, bound together by loss and love in equal measure. But in Emma's imagined world, there was space for someone else. A maternal figure to complete the circle they hadn't even realized was incomplete. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Tell me about your drawing." Emma's face lit up with the excitement of a child sharing a secret. "This is you, and this is me, and this is my new mom." She pointed to each figure in turn. "She reads me stories and makes pancakes on Sunday mornings and braids my hair for school." "A new mom?" Jace kept his voice carefully neutral, though his heart was racing. "What made you think about that?" "Jessica's mom got remarried last month, and now Jessica has a stepdad who teaches her how to ride bikes and helps with homework. She says it's like getting an extra parent for free." Emma's crayon moved across the paper, adding flowers to the front yard. "I was thinking maybe we could get an extra parent too." The longing in her voice was so pure, so guileless, that Jace felt his chest tighten. Of course she wanted a mother. Of course, she noticed the absence of female guidance in her life, the missing piece that no amount of fatherly love could fully replace. He'd been so focused on providing everything she needed that he'd forgotten children sometimes needed things he couldn't give. "What would you want in a new mom?" he asked gently. Emma considered this with the seriousness of a child contemplating world peace. "Someone nice, someone who laughs at our jokes even when they're not funny. Someone who wouldn't try to replace Mama but would just be extra love, you know? Extra love." The phrase lodged itself in Jace's heart like a splinter. When had they stopped believing they deserved extra love? That afternoon, while Emma was at her friend's house, Jace found himself driving past Lincoln Elementary again. The routine had become as natural as breathing check on Marcus, maybe exchange a few words with the elegant woman who was always there, always watching their interactions with an expression he couldn't quite read. Today, something was different. Marcus wasn't by the Tesla. Instead, he was sitting on a bench near the playground, hunched over a notebook with the focused intensity of a young artist. Jace parked and walked over, curious about what had captured the boy's attention so completely. "Hey, Marcus, what you working on?" Marcus looked up, his face brightening with recognition. "Jace, look, I've been drawing juggling patterns." He held up the notebook, revealing page after page of detailed diagrams. Circles with arrows showing the path of thrown objects, stick figures with arms positioned for optimal catching, even mathematical notations about timing and rhythm. "This is incredible," Jace said, and meant it. The drawings showed a sophisticated understanding of physics and movement that seemed advanced for an 8-year-old. "Did you figure all this out yourself?" "Mostly. Mom helped with some of the math parts." Marcus turned to a fresh page and quickly sketched Jace's profile, capturing his likeness with surprising skill. "She's really good with numbers and patterns. She says juggling is just applied, mathematics made fun." Applied mathematics made fun. Jace filed that phrase away, another clue about the mysterious woman who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "Is your mum here today?" "She's in the car, making work calls. She tries to finish everything before pickup time so she can focus on me." Marcus lowered his voice conspiratorially. "She's been happier lately. Ever since I started talking more, she smiles all the time. I think she was really worried about me before." The honesty of it hit Jace like a physical blow. This child understood his mother's worry, carried the weight of her concern in his small shoulders. Parents worry because they love you. It's what we do. "Do you worry about Emma?" "Every day," Jace admitted. "But good worry, you know. The kind that means I care about what happens to you." Marcus nodded sagely. "Mom calls it love worry. She says it's different from bad worry because love worry comes from hope instead of fear." Love worry from hope instead of fear. Another phrase to file away, another glimpse into a family dynamic that seemed as complex as it was caring. They spent the next hour working on 3-ball juggling, with Marcus managing to complete 5 full cycles before losing the rhythm. His face glowed with accomplishment, and when his mother appeared to collect him, the transformation in both of them was visible. The elegant woman Marcus's mother approached with the careful grace of someone navigating uncertain social territory. Up close, she was prettier than Jace had realized, with intelligent brown eyes and the kind of bone-deep elegance that couldn't be bought. But it was the way she looked at Marcus that caught his attention, with wonder, as if she was seeing her son clearly for the first time in years. "You must be Jace," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Ariel. Marcus talks about you constantly." Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine, and her voice carried just a hint of an accent he couldn't place. "It's nice to finally meet you, Ariel. Marcus is a remarkable kid." "He is now," she said softly, and there was something in her tone that suggested this hadn't always been the case. "The juggling lessons have been transformative. I can't thank you enough for your kindness to a stranger's child." "He's not a stranger anymore," Jace replied. "And honestly, he helps me as much as I help him. Teaching someone else reminds me why I love juggling in the first place." Ariel's smile deepened, reaching her eyes. "Marcus mentioned you have a daughter Emma's age. Maybe they could meet sometime." Marcus doesn't have many friends, and from what he tells me about Emma, she sounds wonderful. The suggestion sent an unexpected flutter through Jace's chest. Playdates meant planning, coordination, getting to know other parents. It meant opening their small, self-contained world to include other people. I think Emma would love that. She's been asking about friends lately. Perfect. Perhaps this weekend we could meet at the park, let the children play while we supervise. The slight hesitation before supervise suggested she meant something more like get to know each other, and Jace found himself looking forward to it more than was probably wise. As he watched them drive away in their expensive car, Jace thought about Emma's drawing waiting on the kitchen table, a family of 3 with space for extra love. Maybe the universe was listening after all. Maybe miracles came in many forms: synonymous checks, healing children, and elegant women who looked at struggling single fathers like they might be worth knowing. The thought should have scared him. Instead, it felt like hope. Ariel's business card lay face down on her mahogany desk, its elegant simplicity hiding the complexity of her current situation. Ariel Voss, Chief Executive Officer, Quantum Solutions Technologies, was embossed in silver lettering on cream cardstock that cost more per sheet than most people spent on lunch. But the woman staring at it felt more like a nervous teenager planning her first date than a billionaire who commanded boardrooms across 3 continents. The coffee shop she'd chosen was carefully selected for its casual atmosphere and strategic location, close enough to Lincoln Elementary for a chance encounter, but upscale enough that she wouldn't stand out in her tailored clothes. She'd spent 20 minutes in her walk-in closet that morning, rejecting outfit after outfit as too corporate, too intimidating, too obviously expensive. The irony wasn't lost on her. A woman who owned homes in 5 countries was overthinking an outfit for coffee with a rideshare driver she was secretly supporting. But Jace Monroe wasn't just any rideshare driver. He was the man who'd reached her unreachable son, who'd given Marcus back his smile and his voice. He was also the man whose financial desperation she was quietly alleviating through anonymous channels, creating a web of deception that grew more complicated each day. The Universe Coffee Company buzzed with the comfortable chaos of morning rush hour. Ariel positioned herself at a corner table with clear sightlines to the door, nursing a lavender latte she didn't want while rehearsing conversation starters in her head. The direct approach felt impossible. "Hello, I've been anonymously paying your bills and having you investigated." But casual conversation seemed equally fraught with landmines. When Jace walked in at exactly 9:15, scanning the room with the observant eyes of someone always assessing their environment, Ariel's carefully planned composure evaporated. He was more handsome than she'd realized from surveillance photos, with the kind of authentic masculinity that came from real work and real responsibility. His clothes were clean but clearly chosen for durability over fashion, and he moved with the economical grace of someone who couldn't afford wasted motion. Their eyes met across the crowded coffee shop, and his face lit up with recognition. "Ariel? Marcus's mom?" She stood too quickly, nearly knocking over her untouched latte. "Jace, what a wonderful surprise." "I was just—" She gestured vaguely at her laptop, which displayed a quarterly earnings report she'd been pretending to read. "Coffee break from work. Mind if I join you? I've got a few minutes before my next pickup." He was already pulling out the chair across from her, and Ariel found herself nodding eagerly, too eagerly. She needed to dial back the enthusiasm before he wondered why a chance encounter felt so orchestrated. "Of course. Please, how's Emma doing? Marcus mentioned she was reading above grade level now." Jace's face transformed when he talked about his daughter, the way parents' faces always did when discussing their most precious achievements. "She's incredible. 3 weeks ago she was struggling with basic chapter books, and now she's devouring everything in sight. It's like someone flipped a switch." Someone had, Ariel thought. The switch was financial security, reduced stress, and a father who could focus on nurturing instead of surviving. But she couldn't say that, so she smiled and nodded like this was all news to her. "Children are resilient," she said instead. "Sometimes they just need the right environment to flourish." True, Though I think having Marcus as a friend has helped too. She's been asking about him constantly since they met at the park last weekend. The park meeting had been another carefully orchestrated coincidence, but watching Emma and Marcus play together had been worth every moment of guilty deception. Both children had emerged from their respective shells, Emma's natural leadership drawing Marcus out of his quiet observation mode, while his gentle creativity inspired her artistic side. Marcus feels the same way. He's been drawing pictures of Emma juggling. Apparently she's been practicing with tennis balls. Jace laughed, a sound that did something warm and dangerous to Ariel's carefully guarded heart. She's determined to impress him. Last night she managed 4 throws in a row and made me call her Emma the Magnificent for the rest of the evening. Children's friendships are so pure, aren't they? No agenda, no complicated social dynamics, just genuine connection. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address directly. Adult connections were infinitely more complicated, especially when one party was harboring secrets that could destroy the fragile trust they were building. Speaking of connections, Jace said, his voice taking on a slightly more serious tone, I wanted to thank you for something, even though I'm not sure you'll know what I'm talking about. Ariel's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Oh? Someone's been helping me and Emma, anonymous payments, perfectly timed to cover exactly what we need. Medical bills, rent, expenses I couldn't handle on my own. His eyes searched her face, looking for, what, recognition? Guilt? The timing coincides pretty closely with when I started spending time with Marcus. I don't suppose you'd know anything about that. The moment stretched between them like a tightrope. Ariel could feel the weight of truth pressing against her chest, demanding release. This was her chance to come clean, to explain that gratitude had grown into something deeper, that helping him had become as necessary to her as breathing. But the business card on her desk at home told a different story. If Jace knew who she really was, not just Marcus's mother, but the CEO of a multinational corporation, a woman whose net worth was measured in billions, everything would change. He would see charity instead of affection, obligation instead of choice. The genuine connection they were building would be poisoned by the inequality between them. I wish I could take credit for such generosity, she said carefully, but no, though whoever's helping you has excellent timing and obvious good judgment. It wasn't technically a lie, she told herself. She couldn't take credit for the generosity that belonged to the teams of lawyers and financial advisors she'd hired to maintain her anonymity. And she definitely had excellent timing and good judgment, even if saying so felt like walking on ethical thin ice. Jace nodded slowly, accepting her denial but not entirely convinced. Whoever it is, they've saved our lives. Emma's healthier, happier, more secure. I'm sleeping through the night for the first time in years. It's like having a guardian angel I can't see or thank. Maybe that's the point, Ariel said softly. Maybe some gifts are meant to be received without question, just grace when you need it most. Grace, Jace repeated, testing the word. I like that. Grace from invisible angels. If only he knew, Ariel thought, how visible this particular angel was becoming to herself. How every anonymous payment was really an investment in her own happiness, a way of ensuring that the man who'd saved her son would be free to keep being exactly who he was. They talked for another 30 minutes about children and dreams and the small miracles that made ordinary days worthwhile. When Jace finally left for his next passenger pickup, Ariel remained at the table, staring at her reflection in the coffee shop window. She was falling in love with a man who didn't know her real name, real job, or real net worth. A man she was helping through deception disguised as charity. A man who would probably run if he knew the truth about the guardian angel sitting across from him, planning their next accidental encounter. Can you teach me? The words tumbled from Marcus's lips with the urgency of a child who had been holding them back for too long. He stood beside Jace's car in the school parking lot, clutching a set of rainbow-colored juggling balls with the intensity of someone holding onto hope itself. Jace knelt to Marcus's eye level, studying the boy's face. 3 months ago, Marcus had been frozen in selective silence, locked away from the world by anxieties that no amount of professional intervention had been able to reach. Now he was asking questions, seeking connection, practically vibrating with the kind of eager energy that belonged to healthy 8-year-olds everywhere. "Teach you what, buddy?" "Everything," Marcus said, his eyes bright with determination. "How to make friends like Emma does. How to not be scared when new things happen. How to make Mom smile the way she does when she talks about you." The last part hit Jace unexpectedly, a revelation wrapped in innocent observation. Ariel talked about him to Marcus, and it made her smile. The thought sent a warm flutter through his chest that he tried to ignore. "Those are pretty big things to learn," Jace said gently, "but I think you're already figuring them out on your own." "No, I'm not." Marcus's voice carried the frustration of a child who understood his own limitations too clearly. "I still get scared sometimes. Yesterday at lunch, kids were being loud, and I had to hide in the bathroom until it got quiet again. Emma wouldn't do that. Emma would probably make friends with the loud kids and teach them a game or something." The insight was startling in its accuracy. Emma did have that gift, the ability to transform chaos into connection, to see potential friendships where others saw only noise. It was a trait Jace had always admired but never thought to analyze. "You know what?" Jace said, settling cross-legged on the asphalt. "I think you and Emma are different kinds of brave. She's brave about being loud and taking up space. You're brave about noticing things and thinking deeply. The world needs both kinds." Marcus considered this, absently tossing one of his juggling balls from hand to hand. "Mom says the same thing. She says my quiet thinking is a superpower, but sometimes superpowers feel like curses when you're 8. The wisdom in that statement made Jace pause. Here was a child articulating the complex relationship between gift and burden that most adults struggled to understand. Marcus's sensitivity wasn't a flaw to be fixed, but a strength that needed nurturing, guidance in how to use it without being overwhelmed by it. "Your mum sounds pretty smart," Jace said. "She is. She knows about computers and numbers and how to make companies work better, but she doesn't know about kid stuff very well. She tries, but—" Marcus trailed off, searching for words. "She learned how to be a mum from books and websites. You learned how to be a dad from your heart." The distinction cut deep. Jace thought about his early days with Emma, after Sarah died, fumbling through bedtime routines and ponytail attempts, with nothing but love and desperation to guide him. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe there was a difference between learned parenting and instinctive nurturing. "Can I tell you a secret?" Jace said. "I don't always know what I'm doing either. Half the time I'm just guessing and hoping Emma doesn't notice." Marcus's eyes widened. "Really? But you always seem so sure about everything." "That's the parent trick. We pretend to be confident so our kids feel safe, but inside, we're all just figuring it out as we go." They spent the next hour working on juggling technique, but the real lesson was about patience with yourself, about accepting that mastery came through practice, not perfection. Marcus dropped the balls countless times, but each failure became a small celebration when he picked them up and tried again. "You know what I noticed?" Jace said as they packed up the juggling balls. "You didn't get frustrated once today. 3 months ago, when things didn't work perfectly right away, you would shut down. Now you just keep trying." Marcus beamed with pride. "Mom noticed that too. She says I'm becoming resilient. That's when you bounce back instead of staying knocked down." "Your mom's right again." "She usually is. She's really smart about feelings now too, not just computer stuff. She says talking to you has taught her things about parenting that business school never covered." Another revelation that made Jace's chest tight with unexpected emotion. Ariel was learning from him? A woman who clearly had education, resources, and sophistication was taking parenting lessons from a high school graduate who drove other people's cars for a living. As if summoned by their conversation, Ariel appeared across the parking lot, walking toward them with the careful grace that characterized all her movements. Today she wore dark jeans and a soft sweater that made her look less like a successful professional and more like someone he might actually have a chance with. "How did the lesson go?" she asked, settling onto the ground beside them with an ease that suggested designer jeans were meant for sitting on asphalt. "Jace says I'm getting resilient," Marcus announced proudly. "And he told me about the parent trick where you pretend to know what you're doing." Ariel's laugh was rich and genuine. "Did he now? That's quite a revelation." "I probably shouldn't have shared trade secrets," Jace said, enjoying the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. "Now you know we're all just improvising." "I figured that out months ago," Ariel replied, "though it's nice to know even the natural parents doubt themselves sometimes." Natural parents. The phrase suggested she saw him as something she wasn't, someone who possessed an innate understanding of children that she lacked. But watching her with Marcus, the way she listened completely when he spoke, how she celebrated his small victories with genuine joy, Jace saw a mother who was learning to trust her instincts instead of relying solely on research and expert advice. "Can Emma come over this weekend?" Marcus asked suddenly. "I want to show her my room and my juggling practice space, and maybe we could all have dinner together." The suggestion hung in the air between the adults, loaded with implications. Dinner together, like a family. Like people who were becoming something more than casual acquaintances brought together by their children's friendship. "That sounds wonderful," Ariel said before Jace could overthink it. "If you're free, of course. I make a decent pasta primavera, and Marcus has been wanting to show off his room to Emma for weeks." "Emma would love that," Jace heard himself saying. "She's been asking about Marcus's house ever since they became friends." "It's settled then. Saturday at 6? I'll text you the address." As they exchanged phone numbers, Jace felt like he was crossing some invisible threshold. Contact information meant planning, coordination, the possibility of spontaneous communication. It meant moving from scheduled encounters to actual relationship, whatever form that might take. Later that evening, as Emma practiced her juggling in their small living room, Jace found himself thinking about the conversation with Marcus. The boy's observation about learned versus instinctive parenting, Ariel's admission that she was taking lessons from him, the easy way they'd fallen into planning future time together. "Daddy," Emma said, successfully completing 6 throws in a row before catching all 3 balls triumphantly. "Are you and Mrs. Ariel going to be friends like me and Marcus?" "I think so, sweetheart. Would that be okay with you?" Emma's face lit up with the kind of joy that came from seeing puzzle pieces click into place. "More than okay. I think Mama would like her too. She's the kind of person who really listens when kids talk, and she makes Marcus feel brave. Those are good mum qualities." Good mum qualities. Emma's 8-year-old wisdom cut straight to the heart of what was happening between them. Ariel was becoming someone who mattered, someone whose presence made their small family feel more complete. As Jace tucked Emma into bed that night, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, do you think it's okay to love more than one mum? Not instead of the first mum, but in addition to her." The question took his breath away. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because I think I might be starting to love Mrs. Ariel like a mom, and I don't want to make Mama sad in heaven." Jace sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "I think Mama wants us to be happy and loved. I think she'd be glad to know there was someone else who could love you the way you deserve to be loved." Emma nodded solemnly. "Good, because my heart feels big enough for both of them." Out of the mouths of babes. As Jace turned off her bedroom light, he realized Emma had just articulated what he'd been afraid to admit to himself. His heart was big enough for both Sarah's memory and Ariel's presence. Love didn't have to be rationed or measured or guilty. Sometimes it just had to be welcomed. The newspaper feature article lay spread across the break room table at Murphy's Auto Repair, where Jace had stopped to get his brake pads checked before dinner at Ariel's house. "Tech billionaire Ariel Voss, the woman behind the empire," screamed the headline above a professional photograph that made his blood freeze in his veins. The woman in the picture was unmistakably Ariel Ath. Same intelligent brown eyes, the same elegant bone structure, the same confident smile he'd come to treasure during their coffee shop conversations. But this Ariel wore a power suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, stood in an office that looked like something from a movie about corporate dynasties, and was described in terms that made his head spin. Net worth estimated at $3.2 billion. Youngest woman to take a technology company public. Revolutionary advances in quantum computing applications. Owns homes in Seattle, Manhattan, London, and the French Riviera. Jace's hands shook as he read the article, each detail another blow to his understanding of reality. The woman he'd been falling in love with, the single working mother who understood the challenges of raising a child alone, was one of the wealthiest people in the Pacific Northwest. The woman who'd sat on coffee shop chairs and playground benches, who'd gotten dirt on her designer jeans while watching their children play, was a billionaire. Quantum Solutions Technologies employs over 15,000 people worldwide. Voss's leadership style combines technical innovation with what colleagues describe as uncommon emotional intelligence. Despite her success, she remains intensely private about her personal life, particularly regarding her 8-year-old son Marcus. Marcus, the boy he'd been teaching to juggle, helping to overcome his selective mutism, treating like any other child who needed kindness and patience. Marcus, whose mother could buy and sell Jace's entire neighborhood without checking her bank balance. The implications crashed over him like a tsunami. If Ariel was worth billions, then she had resources, connections, the ability to investigate anyone who came into contact with her son. She had the means to arrange anonymous payments, to hire teams of lawyers and financial advisors to help struggling single fathers while maintaining perfect deniability. She was his guardian angel, the mysterious benefactor who'd been saving his life one perfectly timed payment at a time. The realization should have felt like relief, mystery solved, questions answered. Instead, it felt like betrayal, manipulation, the cruelest kind of charity disguised as coincidence. Every coffee shop conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of growing attraction had been built on lies. She knew everything about his financial desperation, while he knew nothing about her true identity. Jace's phone buzzed with a text from Ariel. Looking forward to dinner tonight. Marcus has been practicing his juggling all day to show Emma. See you at 6. He stared at the message, seeing it now through the lens of her deception. The casual tone, the domestic details, the careful maintenance of the fiction that they were just two single parents getting to know each other. How had she managed to keep a straight face while pretending to understand his struggles? How had she sat in that coffee shop and listened to him worry about anonymous help while knowing she was the source? "You okay, buddy?" Murphy's voice cut through his spiral of betrayal. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Jace said, folding the newspaper with hands that weren't quite steady. "How much do I owe you for the brake work?" "120, but the pads should last you another 30,000 miles. Jace pulled out his wallet, fingers automatically finding the latest anonymous cashier's check, the one that had arrived yesterday for exactly Emma's school supply needs. The check that now had a face attached to it, a name, a reason that had nothing to do with random generosity and everything to do with calculated intervention. The drive to Ariel's house took him through increasingly upscale neighborhoods, past homes that grew larger and more secluded with each passing mile. When he finally reached the address she'd texted, he sat in his car for 5 minutes, staring at what could only be described as a mansion. Stone and timber construction, professionally landscaped grounds, a circular driveway that could accommodate a dozen cars. The kind of house that appeared in magazines about how the other half lived. Emma pressed her face to the car window, eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy, are you sure this is the right address? It looks like a castle." "I'm sure, sweetheart." His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "Remember what we talked about, people live in different kinds of houses, but that doesn't change who they are as people." The words felt like ash in his mouth, because it did change things, didn't it? It changed everything. Marcus answered the door, practically bouncing with excitement. "Emma, Jace, come see my room. It has a climbing wall and everything." The interior of the house was tastefully luxurious, all warm wood and expensive art, the kind of casual elegance that required significant wealth to achieve. Ariel appeared in the foyer wearing jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Jace's car payment, her smile bright and welcoming and completely oblivious to the storm raging behind his eyes. "You found us. I know the address can be a little tricky. We're quite tucked away out here." She hugged Emma warmly, ruffled Marcus's hair, and turned to Jace with the kind of affectionate smile that had been making his heart race for weeks. "How was the drive?" "Enlightening," he said, and something in his tone made her expression shift from welcome to concern. "Is everything all right?" "Actually, I was hoping we could talk, privately." Ariel's eyes searched his face, reading the tension there with the emotional intelligence the article had praised. "Of course. Marcus, why don't you show Emma your room?" "We'll be up in a few minutes." The children thundered up the stairs, their excited chatter fading as Jace followed Ariel into what appeared to be a study lined with books that looked red rather than decorative. She closed the door and turned to face him, her posture already defensive. "You know," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Jace pulled out his phone and showed her the newspaper article he'd photographed in the break room. Ariel Voss, CEO of Quantum Solutions Technologies, net worth $3.2 billion. The woman behind the empire. Ariel's face went pale, but she didn't deny it. "I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain how the mysterious benefactor who's been anonymously paying my bills just happens to be the billionaire mother of the child I've been helping? Can you explain why you've been lying to me for months while pretending to understand financial struggle?" "I wasn't pretending anything," Ariel said, her voice gaining strength. "Yes, I've been helping you financially. Yes, I should have told you. But everything else, every conversation, every moment we've shared that's been real." "Real?" Jace's laugh was bitter. "You sat in that coffee shop and listened to me wonder about my guardian angel while knowing it was you. You let me feel grateful to some mysterious stranger while you watched me like a charity case. That's not how it was." "Then how was it, Ariel? How does a billionaire justify lying to a man she's basically keeping as a pet project?" The words hit their mark. Ariel flinched as if he'd struck her. "A pet project? Is that really what you think this is?" "What else should I think? You have the resources to investigate anyone who comes near your son. You obviously discovered my financial situation and decided to help out of guilt or gratitude or whatever rich people feel when poor people are nice to their children." "Stop it!" Ariel's voice was sharp now, cutting through his anger. "You want to know how it really happened? Fine. Yes, I had you investigated after the orange incident. Yes, I discovered you were struggling. Yes, I arranged for anonymous help because watching you juggle oranges for my son was the first time I'd seen Marcus smile in months." "So it was charity." "It started as gratitude," she interrupted, "but it became something else entirely. It became me falling in love with a man who would give his last orange to a frightened child. It became me realizing that all my money couldn't buy what you gave, Marcus freely, genuine kindness, patience, the ability to see him for who he really is. And you couldn't tell me this because of exactly this reaction." Ariel's composure cracked, revealing the vulnerability underneath. "Because I knew that the moment you found out who I really am, you'd stop seeing me as just Marcus's mother and start seeing me as a walking bank account. Because I was terrified you'd think I was trying to buy your affection instead of earning it." The accusation hung between them, brutal in its accuracy. Because wasn't that exactly what was happening? Wasn't he seeing dollar signs and power imbalances instead of the woman who'd been learning to braid Marcus's hair and getting grass stains on expensive clothes? "The money doesn't matter to me," he said finally. "Doesn't it? Then why are you so angry?" The question stopped him cold. Why was he angry? Because she'd lied, yes. Because she'd manipulated him, certainly. But underneath all that, wasn't he angry because she was so far out of his league that any relationship between them would always be shadowed by inequality? Upstairs, they could hear Emma and Marcus laughing, their innocent friendship uncomplicated by adult concerns about wealth and deception, and the gulf between worlds. Two children who'd found each other across impossible circumstances, proving that connection mattered more than context. "I don't know how to do this," Jace said quietly. "I don't know how to have feelings for someone who could buy my daughter's entire future with pocket change. And I don't know how to love someone without them wondering if it's real or just elaborate charity," Ariel replied. "But I do know that what's happening upstairs, that laughter, that friendship that started because you cared enough to juggle oranges for a frightened child, none of my money could have bought that moment." They stood in her expensive study, surrounded by the evidence of her success, listening to their children discover joy together. The question wasn't whether they could bridge the gap between their worlds. The question was whether they were brave enough to try. Emma's hospital bracelet was too big for her thin wrist, the white plastic sliding down toward her hand as she slept in the pediatric ICU bed. The sight of it made Jace's chest tighten with a fear so primal it obliterated every other concern in his universe. Nothing else mattered, not pride, not deception, not the complicated mess his feelings for Ariel had become. Only Emma, burning with fever and fighting an infection that had turned dangerous with terrifying speed. It had started 2 days after the confrontation at Ariel's house. 2 days of stilted politeness during school pickup, careful distance maintained, while Marcus and Emma continued their friendship as if the adult world hadn't exploded around them. 2 days of Jace wrestling with hurt pride and genuine confusion about what was real and what was purchased, kindness. Then Emma had woken up Tuesday morning complaining of stomach pain, and by Tuesday afternoon she was vomiting and running a fever that climbed despite every medication Jace tried. The emergency room doctor had taken one look at her blood work and made the call, emergency appendectomy, complicated by an infection that had already begun spreading through her small body. "Mr. Monroe?" The surgeon appeared in the waiting room doorway, still wearing scrubs that suggested he'd come straight from the operating room. "The appendectomy went well, but the infection is more serious than we initially thought. We're looking at a minimum 5-day stay, possibly longer depending on how she responds to the antibiotics. 5 days in the pediatric ICU. 5 days of round-the-clock monitoring, specialized medications, and the kind of intensive care that came with intensive costs. Jace's insurance would cover the surgery itself, but the extended stay, the specialized antibiotics, the potential complications, those were the kinds of expenses that created the medical debt that had been drowning him before his mysterious benefactor appeared. Before Ariel appeared, the irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, facing another financial crisis, just days after discovering the identity of the guardian angel who'd been saving him from exactly this kind of disaster. The woman he'd accused of treating him like charity was probably the only person who could help him now, and his pride had made asking impossible. "Daddy?" Emma's voice was small and scratchy from the breathing tube they'd removed an hour earlier. "Are you there?" Jace moved to her bedside, taking her hand carefully around the IV line that snaked up her arm. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." "It hurts," she whispered, and the simple statement broke something fundamental in his chest. "I know, baby, the medicine is going to help, but it takes time. You just rest and let the doctors take care of you." "Is Marcus coming to visit?" He said he wanted to bring me his favorite book. The question twisted the knife deeper. Marcus would want to visit, but that would mean seeing Ariel, dealing with the complicated mess of their relationship, while Emma fought for her health in a hospital bed. "I don't know, sweetheart. Let's just focus on getting you better first." Emma's eyes were already drifting shut again, exhaustion and medication pulling her back towards sleep. Jace sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair and tried to calculate numbers that wouldn't add up no matter how he arranged them. Even with insurance, he was looking at thousands in out-of-pocket expenses. The specialized antibiotics alone cost more per day than he typically earned. His phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor at the rideshare company. "Sorry to hear about Emma. Take all the time you need. Your shifts are covered through Friday." Covered by whom? Jace hadn't told anyone at work about Emma's hospitalization except his immediate supervisor. But somehow his shifts had been mysteriously reassigned, just like his medical bills had been mysteriously paid, just like his rent had been mysteriously covered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She was still doing it. Even after their confrontation, even after he'd accused her of treating him like charity, Ariel was still quietly arranging his life to make things easier. Still watching from the shadows, still intervening when she thought he needed help. "Mr. Monroe?" A new voice interrupted his spiral of confusion and gratitude and frustration. A woman in an expensive suit stood in the doorway, holding a tablet and wearing the kind of professional smile that suggested she dealt with difficult conversations for a living. "I'm Catherine Walsh from Patient Financial Services. I wanted to discuss Emma's treatment plan and the associated costs." Here it comes, Jace thought. The conversation about payment plans and credit applications and all the ways the hospital would try to extract money he didn't have from a father who would mortgage his soul for his daughter's health. "Mr. Monroe, I have some unusual news. Your daughter's entire treatment, the surgery, the extended stay, all medications and aftercares, been covered by the Monroe Family Medical Trust." Jace stared at her, the words not making sense. The what now? The Monroe Family Medical Trust. It's a charitable foundation specifically established to cover medical expenses for your family. All paperwork was filed this morning, and the trust has been funded with sufficient resources to cover any medical needs Emma might have, both current and future. "I don't understand. I never established any trust." "The trust was established by an anonymous donor on your behalf, all completely legal and above board, I assure you. The paperwork indicates the donor wishes to remain completely anonymous, but wanted to ensure Emma receives the best possible care without any financial burden to your family." Anonymous donor. Jace closed his eyes, feeling the familiar mixture of gratitude and frustration that came with Ariel's invisible interventions. Even in their current state of complicated non-relationship, she was still protecting him, still ensuring that Emma's health wouldn't bankrupt their small family. "Is there anything I need to sign?" "Nothing at all. The trust is already active, and all current and future charges will be directed there automatically. You just focus on your daughter's recovery." After the financial counselor left, Jace sat in the gathering dusk of Emma's hospital room and tried to sort through the emotional maze of his situation. Ariel had established a medical trust for his family. Not a one-time payment, not a specific bill covered, but a permanent safety net that would ensure Emma's health was never compromised by his financial limitations. It was the most generous gift imaginable. It was also the most manipulative thing he could conceive of, a way of ensuring he could never truly walk away from her influence, never really be independent of her resources. Or was it just love? The kind of love that looked ahead and saw potential problems and quietly, invisibly solved them before they could cause harm. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and Jace realized the boy must have somehow learned about Emma's hospitalization. "Jace, is Emma okay? Mum told me she was sick and in the hospital, and I wanted to know if she's going to be all right, and if I can visit her and bring her my juggling balls to practice with when she feels better." The words tumbled out in the rushed, anxious way children spoke when they were trying not to cry. In the background, Jace could hear Ariel's voice, gentle and reassuring, telling Marcus to breathe and ask one question at a time. "She's going to be fine, buddy," Jace said, surprised by how much he meant it. "The doctors fixed the problem, and now she just needs to rest and get better. But I think she'd love a visit from her best friend, if that's okay with your mum." "Really? Mum says visiting hours are until 8 and we could bring dinner for you, since you probably haven't eaten anything today and—" "Marcus," Ariel's voice came through more clearly now, taking the phone. "Let me talk to Jace." A pause, then her voice, careful and concerned. "How is she? Marcus has been worried sick since he heard she was in the hospital." "She's going to be fine. Surgery went well. Infection is responding to treatment. She'll be here for a few days, but she's going to be okay." Thank God. The relief in Ariel's voice was unmistakable. "Jace, I know things are complicated between us right now. But if you need anything, you've already done enough." The words came out sharper than he intended. "The medical trust? Really, Ariel?" A long silence. "You found out about that? Kind of hard to miss when the hospital tells you your daughter's entire treatment is being covered by a trust that didn't exist this morning. I couldn't let you choose between Emma's health and financial stability. I couldn't sit in my mansion knowing you were facing bankruptcy because your daughter got sick. So you decided for me. Again." "Yes," Ariel said simply. "I decided that a little girl's health was more important than her father's pride. I decided that Emma deserved the best possible care, regardless of your feelings about charity. I decided to love your family, even if you can't love me back." The honesty of it hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't making excuses or trying to justify her actions as anything other than what they were, love expressed through the only means she knew how to use. "Ariel, Marcus wants to visit Emma. Not because I'm manipulating the situation or trying to force contact, but because an 8-year-old boy is worried about his best friend and wants to make sure she's okay. Can you put aside your anger at me long enough to let two children comfort each other?" Through the phone, Jace could hear Marcus in the background, asking anxiously if Emma was awake and whether she needed anything, and if he could bring her the book he'd been saving to read to her. "Visiting hours end at 8, Jace said finally. "Room 314 in the pediatric wing." "Thank you." "Ariel?" He caught her before she could hang up. "The trust. Thank you. I'm still angry about the deception, but I'm grateful for Emma's health. Both things can be true." "Both things can be true," she agreed softly. "See you at 7. As Jace hung up the phone, Emma stirred in her hospital bed, her eyes finding his face in the dim light of the room. "Was that Marcus? Is he coming to visit?" "Yes, sweetheart. He's coming to see you." Emma's smile was the first genuine happiness he'd seen from her since the fever started. "Good. I want to tell him about the hospital food and ask if his mom knows any good knock-knock jokes. Being sick is boring, but having friends makes it better." Out of the mouths of babes. Maybe having friends did make everything better, even when the friendship was complicated by adult concerns about money and pride and the messy intersection of love and charity. Maybe Emma and Marcus had the right idea after all. The hospital waiting room chair had become Jace's unwilling home for the past 18 hours. Its institutional blue fabric and uncomfortable angles, a stark contrast to the plush furnishings in Ariel's mansion. But comfort was relative when your 8-year-old daughter was fighting sepsis 3 floors above, when the infection that should have been routine had suddenly turned dangerous in the dark hours before dawn. Ariel sat 2 chairs away, maintaining the careful distance they'd established since Marcus's visit the evening before. She'd arrived at 3 a.m. when the nurse called to say Emma had taken a turn for the worse, appearing in the waiting room with coffee and sandwiches. Neither of them could eat, settling into the vigil that parents kept when medical science hit the limits of certainty. They hadn't spoken much. What was there to say when a child's life hung in the balance? All their complications, the money, the deception, the pride seemed ridiculous in the face of Emma's shallow breathing and the monitors that tracked her vital signs with electronic precision. Fear had a way of stripping everything down to what actually mattered. "The antibiotics should start working soon," Ariel said quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the past hour. "The doctor said her white cell count was improving this morning." Jace nodded, not trusting his voice. He'd been holding on to that small piece of good news like a lifeline, repeating it to himself every time the machines upstairs beeped in ways that made his heart race. "Jace." Ariel's voice was soft, hesitant. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it completely before you respond." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw a woman who'd been crying despite her composed exterior. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled from sleeping in waiting room chairs, her perfect makeup long gone. Her carefully styled hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that made her look younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "I know you think I helped you because of guilt or gratitude or some kind of rich person's charity complex," she began. "And maybe it started that way. Maybe the first payment was just about thanking the man who made my son smile. But that's not why I kept helping. That's not why I'm here now. Jace started to respond, but she held up a hand, asking for the space to finish what she'd started. I kept helping because watching you parent Emma taught me things about love I never knew I was missing, because seeing you juggle oranges for a frightened child showed me what real strength looks like. Because every conversation we had made me want to be a better mother, a better person, someone worthy of the kindness you showed my son. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. I'm not here because I feel guilty about having money while you struggle. I'm here because somewhere along the way, you and Emma became my family too. Because the thought of losing either of you feels like losing pieces of my own heart. The honesty of it hit Jace like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on the inequality between them, so consumed with wounded pride and feelings of manipulation, that he'd missed the simple truth sitting right in front of him. Ariel wasn't here out of obligation or charity. She was here because she loved them. Emma asked me something yesterday, he said finally. She wanted to know if it was okay to love more than one mum, not instead of the first mum, but in addition to her. Ariel's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for hours. What did you tell her? I told her that love doesn't have to be rationed, that hearts are big enough for all the people who care about us. He paused, studying her face in the harsh, fluorescent light of the waiting room. I think I've been rationing love too, measuring it, questioning it, treating it like there wasn't enough to go around. Is there enough? The question was barely a whisper. Before Jace could answer, Dr. Martinez appeared in the waiting room doorway, her scrubs fresh and her expression cautiously optimistic. Both parents rose immediately, their personal conversation forgotten in the face of news about Emma. The infection is responding beautifully to the new antibiotic combination, she said without preamble. Her fever broke 20 minutes ago, her white count is dropping, and she's asking for chocolate pudding, which is always a good sign in pediatric patients. The relief was so overwhelming that Jace's knees nearly gave out. Ariel caught his arm, steadying him with the automatic gesture of someone who'd learned to anticipate his needs. She's going to be fine, Dr. Martinez continued. We'll keep her for observation for another day or two, but the crisis has passed. She's asking for both of you, by the way. Something about wanting to show you how she can juggle while lying down. They rode the elevator to Emma's floor in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet, now not the careful distance of unresolved conflict, but the shared relief of parents who'd faced the unthinkable and emerged on the other side. As the elevator doors opened, Ariel turned to him one more time. Is there enough love, Jace? In your heart? In our complicated situation, is there enough room for all of us? The answer had been there all along, waiting for him to stop measuring and questioning and defending long enough to recognize it. Yes, he said simply. There's enough. Two small hands reached for each other across the hospital bed rails, Emma's pale fingers intertwining with Marcus's in the unconscious way children connected when words weren't enough. The simple gesture contained everything the adults had been struggling to articulate: love that transcended circumstances, friendship that ignored the complications their parents had created. I brought you something, Marcus whispered, pulling a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Mom helped me make it while you were sleeping. Emma's eyes, still bright with fever but clear with recovery, lit up with curiosity. What is it? Juggling balls, but special ones. Look. Marcus unwrapped 3 soft fabric balls, each one carefully sewn and filled with rice instead of the usual hard beans. Mom said regular juggling balls might be too hard if you drop them on your bed, so we made these soft ones that won't hurt if they hit you. Jace watched from the doorway as Emma clutched the homemade juggling balls to her chest, her face glowing with the kind of joy that came from knowing someone had been thinking about her during her darkest moments. Beside him, Ariel wiped away tears she probably thought no one could see. They're perfect, Emma breathed. Can you show me how to juggle lying down? I've been practicing the arm movements, but I haven't tried it with real balls yet. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd ask, Marcus said, his earlier shyness completely forgotten in the face of his friend's enthusiasm. I've been working on horizontal juggling all week. Mom says it's actually harder because gravity works differently when you're not standing up. For the next hour, the hospital room filled with gentle laughter as Marcus taught Emma modified juggling techniques for bedridden patients. The soft thud of rice-filled balls hitting the hospital bed provided a rhythm that was infinitely more comforting than the electronic beeping of medical machines. Jace found himself relaxing for the first time in days, watching his daughter's personality emerge from the fog of illness and medication. "You know what I realized?" Emma said during a break in their practice session. "When you're lying down, juggling looks different from above. It's like the balls are dancing in the air instead of just going up and down." "That's exactly right." Marcus's face lit up with the recognition of a kindred spirit. "Mom showed me pictures of juggling patterns from different angles, and they look like flowers or stars or geometric shapes, depending on where you're standing. Your mom is really smart about patterns," Emma said, then looked toward the doorway where Jace and Ariel stood watching. "Both of our parents are smart about different things, but together they know everything we need." The observation hit both adults with the force of childhood wisdom. Out of the mouths of babes, Jace thought. Emma had just articulated what he'd been too proud, and Ariel too guilty to admit they were better together than apart, their different strengths complementing rather than competing. "Emma," Ariel said, stepping forward with the careful movement of someone approaching something precious and fragile, "I wanted to apologize for the grown-up complications that have been affecting our friendship lately. Sometimes adults make things more difficult than they need to be." Emma considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd been forced to mature beyond her years. "Are you and Daddy going to figure out how to be friends again? Because Marcus and I have been worried that our friendship might get broken if you two stay mad at each other." The directness of the question left both adults temporarily speechless. In all their complicated negotiations around pride and money and deception, they'd somehow forgotten that their children's happiness was tied to their ability to find common ground. "We're working on it, sweetheart," Jace said finally. "Sometimes when people care about each other very much, they get scared and say things they don't mean. Like when I got mad at Marcus for beating me at chess and said I didn't want to be his friend anymore," Emma asked. "But then I realized being mad was more lonely than losing at chess, so I apologized and asked if we could play again." "Exactly like that," Ariel said softly. "Sometimes adults need to remember that being right is less important than being kind." Marcus, who had been listening to this exchange with the focused attention of a child trying to understand adult emotions, suddenly brightened. "Does this mean we can all have dinner together again? I've been practicing a new juggling trick I wanted to show Emma, and Mom made her famous chocolate chip cookies that are supposed to help people feel better when they're sick." "I think that sounds perfect," Jace said, looking at Ariel. "If Emma's feeling up to it when she gets out of the hospital, maybe we could all spend some time together, as a family." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and promise. Family. Not the traditional nuclear unit, but something new and blended and complicated and beautiful. Two parents learning to trust each other. Two children who'd already figured out that love multiplied rather than divided when it was shared freely. Emma's smile was radiant. "Can we make it official? Like, can we all be a real family instead of just practicing being one?" "What would make it official for you?" Ariel asked gently. Emma looked at Marcus, and some silent communication passed between them. "We want you and Daddy to get married so Marcus can be my brother for real, and you can be my mom for real, and we can all live in the same house and juggle together every day." The simplicity of childhood wishes, Jace thought. No complicated negotiations about prenups or financial arrangements or the logistics of blending disparate lives. Just the fundamental desire for the people you loved to choose each other permanently. "That's a pretty big decision," he said carefully. "Are you sure that's what you want?" "Daddy," Emma said with the patient tone children used when explaining obvious things to slow adults. "I've been sure since the first time I saw you and Mrs. Ariel look at each other. You get the same happy face Mom used to get when she looked at pictures of you when you were young. Love, from the perspective of a child who'd learned early that happiness was precious and fragile and worth fighting for." Jace met Ariel's eyes across the hospital bed, where their children sat holding hands, and saw his own recognition reflected there. Sometimes the people who saved you weren't the ones you expected. Sometimes they came disguised as problems to solve, rather than gifts to receive. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, they came with children who could teach adults how simple love could be when you stopped making it complicated. The new family photo sat on the mantelpiece in their shared home, 4 faces glowing with the kind of happiness that couldn't be purchased or manufactured, only earned through the patient work of learning to love each other's complicated histories. Emma and Marcus flanked their parents in the center, all of them juggling Jace with his traditional oranges, Ariel with silk scarves that caught the light like butterflies, the children with their collection of soft fabric balls that had started in a hospital room and grown into a symbol of resilience. 6 months had passed since Emma's medical crisis had stripped away all their pretenses and revealed the simple truth underneath. They were better together than apart, their different strengths creating something more beautiful than any of them could achieve alone. The wedding had been exactly what Emma had requested, small, simple, focused on family rather than spectacle. They'd exchanged vows in the backyard of what was now officially their home, with Marcus as ring-bearer and Emma as maid of honor, both children beaming with the satisfaction of matchmakers whose plan had finally come to fruition. Jace had worn his best suit, the one he'd bought for Sarah's funeral but could finally associate with joy instead of grief. Ariel had chosen a dress that was elegant but not intimidating, beautiful but not overwhelming, the visual representation of their compromise between her world and his. The orange juggling had become a family tradition, practiced every Sunday morning in the backyard, while coffee brewed and pancakes waited on the kitchen counter. Marcus had finally mastered the 3-ball cascade, his initial awkwardness replaced by the fluid confidence that came from patient practice. Emma had moved on to more complex patterns, her natural athleticism combining with her father's teaching to create small miracles of coordination and timing. But it was Ariel's transformation that amazed Jace most. The woman who'd once scheduled affection like a business meeting had learned to braid hair and read bedtime stories and recognize the difference between genuine tears and manipulative ones. She approached parenting with the same focused intelligence she'd brought to building her technology empire, but tempered now with intuition and patience and the understanding that some problems couldn't be solved with resources or algorithms. "Daddy, look!" Emma's voice carried across the backyard, bright with accomplishment. "I can do 5 balls now, watch." Jace looked up from the quarterly report he'd been reviewing. His new role at Quantum Solutions involved community outreach and employee relations, using his natural ability to connect with people in service of Ariel's business. Empire and watched his daughter attempt a pattern that would have challenged professional jugglers. She managed 7 catches before the balls scattered across the grass, but her face glowed with the pride of someone pushing her own boundaries. "That was amazing, sweetheart. Your mom would be so proud of how far you've come." The reference to Sarah no longer carried the sting it once had. They'd learned to make space for all their histories, understanding that love didn't require the erasure of what came before. Sarah's photograph still held a place of honor in Emma's room, right next to the wedding picture of their blended family, visual proof that hearts could expand to hold multiple truths simultaneously. "I think she is proud," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Sometimes when I'm juggling, I can feel her watching and cheering me on. Not in a sad way, but in a happy way, like she's glad I found Ariel and Marcus to love too." Marcus looked up from his own practice session, sweat beading on his forehead from the concentration required to maintain his 3-ball pattern. "Do you think people in heaven can juggle? Because if they can, maybe your first mum and my dad are practicing together and laughing about how long it took us to become a family." The mention of Marcus's father was equally natural now. Ariel had shared that story during one of their late-night conversations, explaining how a brief relationship with a colleague had given her Marcus but no lasting partnership, how she'd chosen to focus on building her business empire rather than seeking traditional family structures. But Marcus's curiosity about his absent father had been satisfied by Jace's presence, the boy finding in his stepfather the masculine influence he'd been seeking without even knowing it. "I think they probably are," Jace said, catching all three of his oranges and settling onto the grass beside the children. "And I think they're probably pretty happy about how this all turned out." Ariel emerged from the house carrying a pitcher of lemonade and wearing the kind of casual clothes that had taken her months to feel comfortable wearing. Designer jeans and organic cotton t-shirts, expensive but understated, the uniform of a woman learning to balance her public success with her private happiness. "Family meeting," she announced, settling onto the grass with them in a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "I have news that affects all of us." Emma and Marcus immediately abandoned their juggling practice, sensing adult importance in her tone. Jace felt a flutter of concern their life had finally achieved the kind of stability he'd stopped believing was possible, and change of any kind felt threatening. "The board has approved my proposal for the Quantum Family Foundation," Ariel continued, her business voice softening into something more personal. "We're going to establish a non-profit organization focused on helping single-parent families facing medical crises, providing both financial support and community resources." "Like what you did for us?" Emma asked, her 8-year-old mind immediately grasping the connection. "Exactly like what I did for you, but bigger and more organized." Jace would run the day-to-day operations, using his experience with both struggling financially and recovering from that struggle to help other families navigate similar challenges. The proposal was elegant in its symmetry, using their personal story of connection across economic divides to create systematic help for others facing similar obstacles. It would allow them to transform their individual experience into community benefit, making meaning from their own journey through difficulty. "There's one more thing," Ariel said, pulling an official-looking document from her pocket. "The Foundation's first initiative will be the Sarah Monroe Memorial Fund, providing emergency medical assistance specifically for children who've lost parents to cancer." The name hit Jace like a gentle blow to the chest. Sarah's name, attached to something that would help other families avoid the kind of financial devastation that had nearly destroyed them. It was acknowledgement, honor, and healing all wrapped together in a gesture that somehow managed to honor the past while building the future. "Mom would love that," Emma said simply. "She always said the best way to remember people was to help other people the way they helped you." As the afternoon sun painted their backyard in golden light, Jace looked around at his impossible family, the billionaire wife who'd learned to get grass stains on expensive clothes, the son who'd found his voice through patient kindness, the daughter who'd juggled with 3 different mothers' love supporting her. They were proof that miracles didn't always look like fairy tales, that sometimes the most extraordinary transformations grew from the most ordinary gestures. 3 oranges had started it all. 3 pieces of fruit tossed into the air by a man who simply couldn't walk past a frightened child. Now they were 4 people who'd learned that love multiplied when shared, that wealth meant more than money in the bank, that family was something you built through choice and commitment rather than something you inherited through accident of birth. The juggling continued as the sun set, 4 people keeping impossible objects aloft through patience, practice, and the kind of trust that came from knowing someone would always be there to catch what you couldn't hold alone.